The relentless sun beat down on Abigail Evans as she wiped sweat from her brow, squinting against the harsh glare reflecting off the Nebraska plains. The snap echoed through the still air before she even realized what had happened, the rear wheel of her wagon splitting with a crack that seemed to seal her fate in this desolate stretch between nowhere and oblivion. It was July 1873, and Abigail had been traveling alone for nearly 3 weeks since leaving her aunt's home in Ohio. Her parents had died of typhoid the previous winter, leaving her nothing but debts, painful memories, and a distant relative's invitation to come west. At 22, she had sold everything to purchase the wagon, supplies, and the pair of oxen that now stood listlessly in the scorching heat, seemingly resigned to their shared misfortune. "No, no, no," she murmured, dropping to her knees beside the shattered wheel, her fingers tracing the splintered wood. The nearest settlement was Kearney, still at least a day's journey ahead. Behind her lay nothing but miles of emptiness she'd already traversed. Abigail took inventory of her supplies, a quarter barrel of water that wouldn't last more than 2 days in this heat, some dried meat, flour, and beans. She'd passed a creek 3 days back, but nothing since. The realization sank into her chest like a stone. She might die here, another nameless victim of Western ambition. As the afternoon wore on, Abigail fashioned a small shelter from the canvas cover of her wagon, seeking refuge from the sun that seemed determined to claim her. She rationed a small cup of water, forcing herself to sip slowly despite her parched throat's protests. Her oxen would need water soon too, or they'd be no good to her, even if she managed to repair the wheel, which seemed increasingly impossible given the limited tools she possessed. By dusk, the heat had barely relented. Abigail had attempted to free the broken wheel, but without proper tools, she'd only succeeded in bloodying her hands and adding frustration to her growing list of troubles. As darkness fell across the plains, she built a small fire, partly for warmth as the desert night cooled rapidly, partly as a signal for any passing travelers. "God help me," she whispered to the vast emptiness. "I should never have come." The dancing flames seemed to mock her predicament, casting eerie shadows across the disabled wagon. It was during the coldest part of pre-dawn when Abigail heard it, the distant sound of hoofbeats. She startled from her fitful sleep, scrambling to her feet. Fear and hope warred within her as she stoked her dying fire, throwing on the last branches she'd gathered to create a brighter flame. The silhouette that emerged from the darkness rode tall in the saddle. As he approached, Abigail could make out the broad shoulders, the hat pulled low, and the easy way he handled his mount, a cowboy, trail-worn but alert. Her heart hammered in her chest as she stood her ground beside her broken wagon, acutely aware of her vulnerability. "Hello, the camp." The man's voice carried across the distance between them, a customary greeting that allowed her to prepare for his approach. "Hello," Abigail called back, one hand reaching for the small pistol her father had insisted she carry. It remained hidden in the folds of her skirt, a last resort she hoped she wouldn't need. The rider approached slowly, his horse's hooves crunching on the dry earth. As he came into the firelight, Abigail saw a face weathered by sun and wind, but with kind eyes that assessed her situation before even looking properly at her. "Looks like you've had some trouble, madam," he said, dismounting with a fluid grace that spoke of years in the saddle. "My wheel," Abigail explained needlessly, gesturing toward the broken remains. "It just gave way." The stranger nodded, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair. He appeared to be in his early 30s, his face lined with experience rather than age. "I'm Adam Armstrong," he introduced himself, keeping a respectful distance. "Ranch hand from the Double Fork, about 20 miles west of Kearney." Abigail Evans, she replied, relaxing slightly at his non-threatening manner. I was headed to Kearney. My aunt has arranged employment for me there. Adam circled the wagon, examining the damage with practiced eyes. This is beyond field repair, Miss Evans. That wheel's completely gone. The confirmation of what she already knew sent a wave of despair through Abigail. Then I'm stranded. For now, he agreed, then reached for his canteen. When did you last have water? I've been rationing what's left, she admitted. It won't last another day in this heat. Without hesitation, Adam extended his canteen toward her. Drink, he encouraged. There's a water hole about 5 miles from here. I can refill. Abigail hesitated only briefly before accepting the canteen, her thirst overcoming her caution. The water was cool, tasting sweeter than any she'd ever known. Thank you, she said, forcing herself to stop after several swallows, though she could have emptied the container. Adam took the canteen back, his eyes meeting hers with a steady gaze that made her breath catch. We go together now, he said simply. I'll help you salvage what you can and we'll head for Kearney. My horse can carry you and some of your belongings. The oxen will follow. You would do that for a stranger? Abigail asked, suspicious of such ready kindness. A smile crossed Adam's face, transforming his serious expression. Out here, nobody stays a stranger for long, Miss Evans. Survival depends on helping one another. By first light, they had packed what Abigail deemed essential: her clothes, family keepsakes, and practical supplies. Adam fashioned a travois for his horse to drag, increasing what they could salvage. With reluctance, Abigail abandoned the wagon that had carried her from Ohio, her last connection to her former life. Ready? Adam asked as he helped her mount his horse, arranging himself behind her with a careful distance that respected propriety while providing security. Yes, Abigail replied, though uncertainty clouded her voice. She was placing her trust in a man she'd known for mere hours, heading toward a town she'd never seen, to start a life she couldn't envision. As they set out across the plains, the rising sun bathed the landscape in golden light, transforming the harsh desert into something almost beautiful. Adam guided his horse with minimal direction, one arm loosely around Abigail to steady her. Have you been in Nebraska territory long? She asked, breaking the silence that had settled between them. 7 years, he replied. Came out after the war with nothing but my horse and the clothes on my back, found work at Double Fork and have been there since. The war, Abigail turned slightly to see his face. You fought. A shadow crossed his features. Cavalry, Union side. Wasn't much older than you when I joined up. Abigail nodded, understanding the reticence in his voice. Her own brother had died at Gettysburg, leaving wounds in her family that never properly healed. And you? Adam asked. What brings a young woman alone across the country? Abigail explained about her parents, the debts, and her aunt's offer. She's arranged for me to work at the hotel in Kearney. It's not what I imagined for my life, but it's a chance to start anew. Fresh starts are what the West was made for, Adam said, his breath warm against her ear. They rode steadily through the morning, stopping briefly at the water hole Adam had mentioned. It was little more than a spring-fed pool nestled among rocks, but the water was clear and cold. Adam refilled their canteens while Abigail splashed her face, feeling human again as the dust and despair of the previous day washed away. Your oxen seem glad for the rest, Adam observed as the animals drank deeply. They've been good companions, Abigail said, patting one's broad head. I've grown fond of them, despite their stubbornness. Most living things are stubborn when they need to be, Adam replied with a small smile. It's what keeps us alive out here. As they continued their journey, the landscape gradually changed. the barren plains giving way to more varied terrain with occasional trees offering blessed shade. Adam pointed out landmarks, naming rock formations and distant hills with the familiarity of someone who considered this harsh land home. "How much farther to Kearney?" Abigail asked as the afternoon sun began its descent. "We'll reach it by tomorrow midday," Adam answered. "We'll make camp at Beaver Creek tonight. It's safe, with good water and shelter." The prospect of another night in the open made Abigail nervous, though she was reluctant to admit it. As if sensing her discomfort, Adam added, "I'll sleep across the fire, Miss Evans. You have my word." His understanding of her unspoken concern touched Abigail. "I appreciate your kindness, Mr. Armstrong. Without you, I'd likely still be stranded or worse." "Call me Adam," he said. "Out here, formalities seem unnecessary between people who have shared water." "Then I'm Abigail," she replied, a smile warming her voice. By dusk, they reached Beaver Creek, a modest stream lined with cottonwoods that provided welcome relief from the open plains. Adam helped Abigail dismount, his hands steady at her waist, lingering just a moment longer than necessary before he stepped away. "I'll tend to the animals," he said, leading his horse and the oxen to the creek. "If you'd like to wash up, there's a bend in the stream just past those trees that offers privacy." Grateful for the opportunity, Abigail gathered her small bundle of toiletries and a clean blouse, making her way to the spot Adam had indicated. The water was cool against her skin as she quickly washed away the day's dust, changing into fresher clothes that made her feel renewed despite their wrinkled state. When she returned to their campsite, Adam had a small fire going and was brewing coffee in a battered pot. He'd laid out his bedroll on one side of the fire and arranged her blankets on the other. "Not much for dinner, I'm afraid," he said, offering her a plate with strips of dried beef and hardtack, "but it'll keep our strength up." "It's more than I'd have had alone," Abigail pointed out, accepting the simple meal gratefully. They ate in companionable silence as darkness settled fully around them, the fire casting a warm glow on their faces. Abigail studied Adam surreptitiously, noticing the way the firelight caught in his eyes and defined the strong lines of his jaw. He was handsome in a rugged, unrefined way that she found unexpectedly appealing. "Tell me about Kearney," she requested, setting aside her empty plate. "What sort of place is it?" Adam considered the question, sipping his coffee. "Growing fast since the railroad came through. It's rough in parts any frontier town is, but there are good people there. The hotel where you'll be working is owned by the Bakers, decent folks who run a clean establishment. And this ranch where you work the Double Fork, is it far from town?" "Far enough," he answered with a hint of regret in his voice. "I get into Kearney maybe once a month for supplies or when the boss needs errands run." The implication that they might not see each other again after tomorrow hung between them, unexpectedly disappointing to Abigail. "What took you out so far from the ranch today?" she asked suddenly, realizing she'd never questioned why he'd been traveling alone. "Tracking strays," Adam explained. "We lost a few head in a thunderstorm last week. I was heading back when I saw your fire." "Then I'm fortunate you're good at your job," Abigail said, smiling. Adam laughed, a warm sound that melted something inside her. "I suppose you are at that." As the night deepened, weariness overtook them both. Adam banked the fire to keep it burning low through the night, then settled onto his bedroll. "Sleep well, Abigail," he said softly. "Tomorrow you'll see your new home." "Thank you, Adam," she replied, pulling her blanket close against the night's chill. "For everything." Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Abigail for a time as she lay watching the stars wheeling overhead, more brilliant than she'd ever seen them back east. Across the fire, Adam's breathing had deepened into the steady rhythm of slumber. There was something comforting about his presence, this stranger who had so quickly become her protector and guide. With that thought warming her more than the fire, Abigail finally drifted into sleep. Morning brought the chorus of birds and the soft sounds of Adam already awake, tending to the animals. Abigail rose quickly, embarrassed to be caught still sleeping. "Good morning," Adam greeted her, returning from the creek with freshly filled canteens. "Coffee's ready if you want some before we head out." "Thank you," Abigail said, accepting the cup he offered. The coffee was strong and black, but she welcomed its warmth and the jolt of energy it provided. They broke camp efficiently, Abigail following Adam's lead as they packed their meager belongings. Within the hour, they were back on the trail, heading toward Kearney with the sun climbing steadily at their backs. The landscape grew more populated as they traveled, occasional farmsteads dotting the distance, plumes of smoke rising from chimneys against the blue sky. Signs of civilization both relieved and unsettled Abigail. She was eager to reach the safety of town, yet strangely reluctant for this journey with Adam to end. "There," Adam said, pointing toward the horizon around midday. "You can just make out the buildings." Squinting, Abigail could indeed see the distant outlines of structures rising from the plains Kearney, her destination and future home. Her heart quickened with both anticipation and anxiety. As they approached the outskirts of town, the sounds of civilization grew more distinct: wagon wheels on packed dirt, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer, voices calling out greetings and business. Kearney was indeed growing, with new construction visible at several points along the main street. Adam guided them directly to a 3-story clapboard building with a freshly painted sign proclaiming it the Prairie Rose Hotel. He dismounted first, then helped Abigail down, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "Well," he said, a note of finality in his voice, "here you are, safe and sound." Before Abigail could respond, the hotel's door opened, and a plump woman in her 50s hurried out, her face a mixture of relief and concern. "Abigail Evans, is that you, child? We've been worried sick. Your aunt's letter said you should have arrived days ago, Mrs. Baker, I presume," Abigail said, stepping forward to greet her new employer. "I'm sorry to have caused concern. My wagon wheel shattered in the desert heat. If not for Mr. Armstrong here, I might never have made it. Mrs. Baker turned her attention to Adam, assessing him with a shrewd eye that softened as she recognized him. "Armstrong from the Double Fork, isn't it? I remember you from your visits to town." Adam nodded, touching the brim of his hat respectfully. "Yes, madam. Found Miss Evans stranded about a day's ride east. Couldn't leave her there." "Indeed you couldn't," Mrs. Baker agreed emphatically. "You'll stay for a proper meal, of course, on the house, as thanks for bringing our new girl safely to us." Adam hesitated, glancing at Abigail. "That's kind, but I should get back to the ranch. They'll be expecting me." "Nonsense," Mrs. Baker insisted. "Even cowboys need to eat. Besides, I'm sure Miss Evans would appreciate a familiar face while she settles in." Abigail found herself nodding eagerly. "Please, Adam. At least stay for a meal. I'd like to properly thank you." Something in her expression must have convinced him, for Adam relented with a small smile. "All right. A meal would be welcome, Mrs. Baker." Bustled them inside, calling for her husband to help with Abigail's belongings and to see to the animals. The hotel's interior was surprisingly elegant for a frontier establishment, with polished floors, tasteful furnishings, and clean, bright windows letting in ample light. "Your aunt has arranged everything," Mrs. Baker explained as she led Abigail to a small but neat room on the second floor. "You'll help with housekeeping and serving in the dining room. Room and board included, plus a small wage. More as you prove yourself, of course." "It sounds perfect," Abigail said, genuinely pleased with the arrangement. After the uncertainty of recent days, the prospect of steady work and a roof over her head seemed like luxury indeed. "Get freshened up, dear," Mrs. Baker suggested kindly. "Then come down to the dining room. I'll have cook prepare something special for you and your rescuer." Left alone, Abigail quickly washed away the trail dust and changed into her best remaining dress, a simple blue cotton that had somehow survived the journey relatively unwrinkled. She pinned up her hair, studying her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. The woman who looked back at her seemed different, somehow more confident perhaps, or simply more weathered by her experiences. Downstairs, she found Adam waiting in the dining room, looking slightly uncomfortable in the civilized setting. He'd removed his hat and made an attempt to smooth his hair, though it still showed the indent where his hat had rested. He stood as she entered, his eyes widening appreciatively at her transformed appearance. "You look lovely," he said simply, pulling out a chair for her. "Thank you," Abigail replied, feeling a blush warm her cheeks. "And thank you for waiting, Mrs. Baker appeared with 2 plates heaped with roast beef, potatoes, and fresh vegetables, a feast compared to their previous meals on the trail. A young serving girl followed with a basket of bread still warm from the oven. "Eat your fill," Mrs. Baker instructed. "You both look like you could use a proper meal." They needed no further encouragement, falling to the food with hearty appreciation. Abigail hadn't realized how hungry she truly was until the rich aromas triggered an almost painful response in her empty stomach. "Mrs. Baker certainly knows how to make a person feel welcome," Adam commented between bites. "She seems kind," Abigail agreed. "I think I'll be happy here." A shadow crossed Adam's face briefly. "I'm glad," he said, his tone sincere despite the hint of regret she detected. "You deserve happiness after what you've been through." Their meal progressed with easy conversation, Abigail sharing stories of her journey west, Adam countering with tales of ranch life and the characters he worked alongside. It felt remarkably comfortable, as if they'd known each other far longer than a mere day. All too soon, the plates were empty and the sun was lowering toward the western horizon. Adam glanced out the window, then back at Abigail with clear reluctance. "I should be going," he said quietly. "It's a long ride back to Double Fork." "Of course," Abigail nodded, fighting against the disappointment rising in her throat. "I understand." They walked together to the hotel entrance where Adam's horse had been watered, fed, and made ready for the return journey. Mr. Baker had already seen to the oxen, placing them in the hotel's stable until other arrangements could be made. "Thank you again," Abigail said as they stood awkwardly beside Adam's mount. "I don't know what would have become of me if you hadn't come along." "I'm glad I was there," Adam replied, his voice low. He hesitated, then added, "Abigail, whatever he meant to say was interrupted by Mrs. Baker calling from the doorway. "Mr. Armstrong, don't forget to take this food for your journey." She hurried forward with a cloth-wrapped package. Adam accepted it with thanks, then turned back to Abigail. The moment had passed, leaving an unspoken sentiment hanging between them. "Will I see you again?" Abigail asked boldly, surprising herself with her directness. A slow smile spread across Adam's face. "I reckon you will. I make it to town regularly for supplies. Perhaps next time you'll let me take you to dinner properly, not as a rescued traveler, but as a lady I'd like to call on." Joy bloomed in Abigail's chest. "I'd like that very much." Adam mounted his horse with practiced ease, looking down at her with an expression that sent warmth coursing through her. "Until then, Miss Evans," he said, tipping his hat. "Until then, Mr. Armstrong," she replied, stepping back as he turned his horse and rode away, a silhouette against the setting sun. Watching him go, Abigail felt a curious mixture of sadness and hope. In the space of 2 days, her life had transformed completely from despair in the desert to the promise of a new beginning. And perhaps, she thought with a small smile, the beginning of something else altogether. The weeks that followed saw Abigail settling into her new life at the Prairie Rose Hotel. Mrs. Baker proved to be a fair employer, strict but kind, teaching Abigail the intricacies of running a respectable hotel on the frontier. The work was demanding but satisfying, and Abigail quickly won the approval of both the Bakers and the hotel's regular patrons with her efficiency and cheerful disposition. Kearney itself was a revelation, a bustling town growing rapidly around the railroad that had reached it just a few years prior. Where once had stood a simple military outpost, now thrived a community of merchants, farmers, ranchers, and all the supporting businesses that accompanied civilization's march westward. The streets were busy from dawn until well after dusk, with freight wagons, riders, and pedestrians creating a constant flow of activity. Despite her busy schedule, Abigail found herself watching for a particular figure among the cowboys who occasionally passed through town. Each time the hotel door opened, her heart would leap with anticipation, only to settle back with disappointment when the visitor proved to be someone else. "You're looking for that handsome cowboy who brought you in, aren't you?" observed Jenny, another girl who worked at the hotel, after catching Abigail's gaze drifting to the window for the dozenth time that day. "I don't know what you mean," Abigail protested, though the blush spreading across her cheeks belied her denial. Jenny laughed, her youthful face alight with amusement. "Don't fret. Your secret's safe with me, though it's hardly a secret Mrs. Baker's been saying she's never seen a man look at a woman the way Mr. Armstrong looked at you." "Has she really?" Abigail couldn't help asking, her curiosity overcoming her embarrassment. "Indeed she has," Jenny confirmed, leaning closer conspiratorially. "And Mr. Taylor from the Mercantile says the double fork hands usually only come to town once a month, so your cowboy should be due any day now." The thought both thrilled and terrified Abigail. In the 3 weeks since their parting, Adam had occupied her thoughts far more than was proper for a mere acquaintance. She'd replayed their brief time together countless times, wondering if she'd imagined the connection between them or if he truly felt it too. "He's not my cowboy," Abigail insisted, though the words felt hollow even to her own ears. "If you say so," Jenny replied with a knowing smile. "Just remember I helped arrange your schedule when he does come calling." 2 days later, Abigail was arranging fresh flowers in the hotel lobby when the door swung open, admitting a shaft of bright sunlight and a tall figure that made her heart stutter in her chest. Adam stood framed in the doorway, hat in hand, looking somehow both familiar and new. He'd clearly made an effort with his appearance. His shirt was crisp, his hair neatly trimmed, his boots polished to a shine. "Miss Evans," he greeted her formally, though his eyes held a warmth that was anything but distant. "I hope I find you well." "Mr. Armstrong," Abigail replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "What a pleasant surprise. Yes, I'm very well, thank you." Adam crossed the lobby to stand before her, his presence seeming to fill the space between them. "I was hoping, that is, if you're not otherwise engaged, I wondered if you might join me for dinner this evening." "I'd be delighted," Abigail answered, perhaps too quickly to maintain any pretense of mere politeness. "My duties end at 5 o'clock. The smile that transformed Adam's face was worth any lapse in decorum. "Perfect. I'll return at 5:30 if that suits you." "It suits me very well," Abigail confirmed, aware of Mrs. Baker watching their exchange with barely concealed approval from the reception desk. True to his word, Adam returned promptly, leading Abigail not to the hotel's dining room as she'd expected, but to a small restaurant at the other end of Main Street. "Mrs. Miller serves the best food in town," Adam explained as he held the door for her. "I thought you might appreciate a change from the hotel fare." The restaurant was cozy and inviting, with checkered tablecloths and a vase of wildflowers on each table. Mrs. Miller herself, a gray-haired woman with a grandmotherly smile, showed them to a table near the window, where they could watch the activity on the street while enjoying relative privacy. "I see you've settled in well," Adam observed once they were seated and had ordered. "The Bakers speak highly of you. Mrs. Baker cornered me the moment I entered the hotel this afternoon to sing your praises." Abigail laughed, both pleased and embarrassed. "They've been very kind. It's not the life I imagined for myself, but I'm finding satisfaction in it." "What did you imagine?" Adam asked, his expression genuinely interested. The question gave Abigail pause. No one had asked about her dreams before. "I suppose I thought I'd marry, have children, maintain a home like my mother did. Simple aspirations, really." "Not simple at all," Adam countered softly. "Those are the things that matter most." Their dinner arrived: tender roast chicken, fresh vegetables from Mrs. Miller's garden, and fluffy biscuits that melted in the mouth. The food was indeed excellent, but Abigail found herself more nourished by the conversation that flowed between them. Adam shared stories of his life before Nebraska, growing up in Pennsylvania, his time in the cavalry during the war, the aimless wandering afterward that had eventually led him west. In turn, Abigail told him about her childhood in Ohio, her love of books, the devastating loss of her parents, and her determination to forge a new path. "You're brave," Adam said as they lingered over apple pie and coffee. "Most women wouldn't have attempted that journey alone." "I'm not sure it was bravery so much as necessity," Abigail demurred, "though I admit there were moments when I questioned my sanity." "Like when your wagon wheel shattered," Adam suggested with a teasing smile. "Especially then," Abigail agreed, returning his smile. Though in retrospect, perhaps that was fortunate rather than unfortunate. A meaningful look passed between them, acknowledging the serendipity that had brought them together. As the evening drew to a close, Adam walked Abigail back to the hotel, their pace deliberately slow to extend their time together. "How long will you be in town?" Abigail asked, dreading the answer yet needing to know. "Just until tomorrow afternoon," Adam replied regretfully. "I have duties back at the ranch." Disappointment washed through Abigail, though she'd expected as much. "I understand." They'd reached the hotel steps, pausing in the pool of light spilling from the windows. Around them, Kearney continued its evening bustle, but in that moment they might have been alone in the world. "Abigail," Adam said, his voice low and serious, "may I call on you again when I return next month?" "I would be disappointed if you didn't," she answered honestly. Adam's smile at her words was radiant. Impulsively, he reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin as he raised it to his lips. "Until next time, then," he murmured. "Until next time," Abigail echoed, her hand tingling where his lips had touched. With a final look that said more than words could express, Adam turned and walked away into the gathering darkness. Abigail watched him go, her heart fuller than it had been in longer than she could remember. True to his word, Adam returned to Kearney the following month, and the month after that, establishing a pattern that the townsfolk soon noticed and commented upon. Each visit followed a similar routine: dinner at Mrs. Miller's, followed by a walk through town, or, as the weather cooled into autumn, attendance at whatever social events Kearney offered. By his fourth visit in November, their relationship had evolved from formal to comfortable, with an undercurrent of growing affection that neither openly acknowledged but both clearly felt. On this particular evening, they sat in the hotel's parlor after returning from a harvest dance at the town hall, enjoying the warmth of the fire as the season's first snowflakes drifted past the windows. "I've been thinking," Adam said, breaking a companionable silence. "The double fork will be quieter over winter. I could arrange to visit more frequently every 2 weeks, perhaps." Abigail's heart leapt at the suggestion. "Would your employer allow that?" "Mr. Thornton is reasonable," Adam replied. "Besides, I've accumulated time owed. And there are always supplies needed from town." "Then I would welcome more frequent visits," Abigail said, trying to contain her happiness within the bounds of propriety. Adam's eyes, warm in the firelight, held hers. "I find the time between seeing you grows increasingly difficult to bear," he admitted quietly. The simple honesty of his words touched Abigail deeply. "I feel the same," she confessed. Adam reached across the small space between their chairs, taking her hand in his. For a long moment, neither spoke, letting the contact express what they weren't yet ready to put into words. The winter of 1873-1874 proved to be a turning point in their relationship. As promised, Adam visited Kearney every 2 weeks, sometimes staying for 2 days rather than one. With each visit, the bond between them strengthened, transcending the initial attraction to become something deeper and more enduring. By February, Kearney had accepted them as a couple, with Mrs. Baker discreetly chaperoning their time together at the hotel, while giving them enough privacy to develop their connection naturally. Adam was respectful of Abigail's reputation, always conscious of propriety while finding small ways to express his growing feelings: a touch of hands, a meaningful glance, the occasional gift of a book he thought she might enjoy, or a ribbon that matched her eyes. It was during a particularly bitter cold spell in late February that their relationship took its most significant step forward. Adam had arrived in Kearney despite treacherous conditions, concerned about Abigail when he'd heard reports of illness spreading through town. "You shouldn't have risked the journey," Abigail scolded gently as they sat near the hotel's massive fireplace, the wind howling outside. "The roads are dangerous in this weather." "I had to see for myself that you were well," Adam replied, his expression serious. "3 people died in the next town over. The thought that you might fall ill with no one to care for you—" "I have the Bakers," Abigail reminded him, though deeply touched by his concern. "It's not the same," Adam said, his voice dropping. He took both her hands in his expression more vulnerable than she'd ever seen it. "Abigail, these past months have been the happiest of my life. When we're apart, I find myself counting the days until I can see you again. When we're together, the world seems brighter, more full of possibility." Abigail's breath caught in her throat. "Adam, I love you," he said simply, the words hanging in the air between them. "I think I've loved you since I found you beside that broken wagon, though I didn't recognize it then." "I know it may be too soon." "It isn't," Abigail interrupted, her eyes shining with unshed tears of joy. "I love you too. I think perhaps I always have." The smile that illuminated Adam's face was like sunrise breaking over the plains. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle, reverent kiss that promised more than it demanded. When they separated, both slightly breathless, Adam kept her hands in his. "I don't have much to offer yet," he said earnestly. "I've been saving for land of my own, but it will take time. I wouldn't ask you to live at the bunkhouse on Double Fork, and I want to do right by you. I don't need grand gestures or promises you can't keep," Abigail assured him. "Just knowing you love me is enough for now." "For now," Adam agreed, raising her hand to his lips. "But not forever. You deserve a home, security, a future. I intend to provide them all in time." As winter reluctantly released its grip on the plains, yielding to the tentative greening of spring, Adam and Abigail's courtship blossomed alongside the returning wildflowers. Their love, nurtured through shared experiences and deepening understanding, had become the talk of Kearney, a bright spot of romance in the often harsh reality of frontier life. It was in early April, with the world renewed around them, that Adam arrived in Kearney with an unusual air of nervous excitement. He found Abigail in the hotel garden, where she was helping Mrs. Baker plant the kitchen herbs that would flavor their meals through summer and fall. "Might I borrow Miss Evans for a while?" Adam asked Mrs. Baker, who smiled knowingly and shooed them away with a motherly wave. "What is it?" Abigail asked as Adam led her toward the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open prairie. "You seem different today." "Do I?" Adam replied evasively, though his eyes sparkled with barely contained emotion. "Perhaps I am." They walked to a slight rise overlooking a creek that meandered across the landscape, where wildflowers created patches of vibrant color against the new grass. Adam had clearly planned this moment, for a blanket was already spread on the ground with a small basket waiting. "A picnic?" Abigail asked, delighted by the surprise. "Among other things," Adam said, helping her settle on the blanket before joining her. They enjoyed a simple meal of bread, cheese, and early strawberries, their conversation flowing easily as always. But Abigail noticed Adam growing increasingly distracted, checking his pockets several times when he thought she wasn't looking. Finally, as they watched the sun begin its westward descent, Adam took a deep breath and turned to face her fully. "Abigail," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "These past months have shown me what life can be when shared with someone you love. I came west seeking a future, but I never imagined finding someone who would make that future so bright with possibility." Realization dawned on Abigail as Adam reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I meant what I said about wanting to provide properly for you," he continued. "While I've been coming to town these past months, I've also been working on something." He gestured toward the creek below them. "There, just beyond that bend, I've purchased 160 acres under the Homestead Act. I've already begun building a house, nothing grand, but solid and weathertight, with room to grow as our family might." Tears welled in Abigail's eyes as Adam opened the box, revealing a simple gold band set with a small, perfect diamond. "I'm asking if you'll share that home with me," Adam said, his voice rough with emotion. "If you'll be my wife, my partner in whatever life brings us. I love you, Abigail Evans. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Abigail answered without hesitation, her voice breaking on the simple affirmation. "Yes, Adam, I will marry you." With hands that trembled slightly, Adam slid the ring onto her finger, then gathered her into an embrace that spoke of both passion and tenderness. Their kiss sealed the promise between them, a commitment to a shared future that neither could have envisioned when they'd met on that desolate stretch of prairie. "When?" Abigail asked as they finally parted, her fingers intertwining with his. "When will we marry?" "As soon as the house is finished," Adam replied. "Another month, perhaps two. I've hired 2 men from town to help with the building, so it's progressing quickly." "Show me," Abigail requested impulsively. "Show me our home." Adam hesitated only briefly before nodding. "It's not much to see yet, but if you're sure." "I want to see it through your eyes," Abigail insisted, "to share in the vision of what it will become." They packed away the picnic things and walked hand in hand down the slope and along the creek. As they rounded the bend Adam had indicated, Abigail caught her first glimpse of their future home, the foundation and frame of a modest house taking shape on a slight rise overlooking the water, positioned to catch the morning sun and protected from the worst of the winds by a stand of cottonwoods. The main floor will have a kitchen, a living area, and a small study for you. I know how you love your books, Adam explained as they approached. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms for now with space to add more as needed. Abigail walked through the skeletal structure, her imagination filling in the walls, the furnishings, the life they would build here. She could almost hear children's laughter echoing through rooms not yet enclosed, could almost smell bread baking in an oven not yet installed. "It's perfect," she declared, turning to embrace Adam in the center of what would become their home. "Absolutely perfect." The news of their engagement spread quickly through Kearney, met with widespread approval and genuine good wishes. Mrs. Baker immediately appointed herself unofficial wedding coordinator, while Mr. Baker offered to give Abigail away in the absence of her father. Jenny and the other hotel staff busied themselves with plans for the wedding breakfast, determined to make it an occasion to remember. As April turned to May, and May to June, Abigail divided her time between her duties at the hotel and preparations for her new life. She sewed curtains for windows not yet glazed, collected recipes for the meals she would prepare in her own kitchen, and gradually assembled the linens and household items every new bride required. Adam, meanwhile, worked tirelessly on their home, dividing his time between his duties at Double Fork and the construction project that represented their future. Each time he visited Kearney, he brought updates on their house. The roof was on, the chimney completed, the windows installed, the floors laid by mid-June. With summer in full bloom across the Nebraska plains, Adam arrived in Kearney with the news they'd been waiting for. "It's ready," he announced, his face alight with pride and anticipation. "Our home is ready for you." Mrs. Baker, who had been hovering nearby, clasped her hands together in delight. "Then the wedding must be Sunday next," she declared. "I've already spoken with Reverend Thompson, and he's holding the date." Abigail and Adam exchanged startled glances, then broke into matching smiles. "Sunday next it is," Adam agreed, taking Abigail's hand. "If that suits you, my love." "Perfectly," Abigail confirmed, her heart too full for more elaborate expression. The days that followed passed in a flurry of activity. Abigail's wedding dress, a creation of ivory silk that Mrs. Baker had secretly ordered from Omaha, was delivered and fitted. The hotel's dining room was prepared for the wedding breakfast, decorated with wildflowers gathered from the surrounding prairie. Adam arranged for a wagon to transport Abigail's belongings to their new home after the ceremony. On the eve of their wedding, Abigail found herself alone in her room at the hotel, contemplating the momentous change her life was about to undergo. From the desperate young woman stranded in the desert heat less than a year ago, she had transformed into a bride-to-be, loved and respected in her community, with a future brighter than any she could have imagined. A knock at her door interrupted her reflections. Opening it, she found Mrs. Baker holding a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "A wedding gift," the older woman explained, pressing the package into Abigail's hands. "Something every bride should have, though it's not the sort of present given publicly." Curious, Abigail unwrapped the tissue to reveal a nightgown of fine white cotton, embroidered with delicate flowers and trimmed with lace. "Oh, Mrs. Baker," Abigail breathed, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "It's beautiful. You've become like a daughter to us," Mrs. Baker said, her eyes misting slightly. "Edward and I are so happy you found love, even if it means losing our best employee." Abigail embraced the woman who had been her employer, mentor, and friend. I can never thank you enough for all you've done for me. Live well and be happy, Mrs. Baker replied simply, That's thanks enough. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, as if nature itself approved of the union about to take place. The small church at the edge of town was filled to capacity with well-wishers, not just the bakers and hotel staff, but merchants, ranchers, and townsfolk who had come to know and care for the couple during their courtship. Adam stood at the altar, more handsome than Abigail had ever seen him in a new suit purchased for the occasion. His face, as she walked down the aisle on Mr. Baker's arm, held an expression of such adoration that Abigail felt her heart might burst with answering love. The ceremony itself was simple but deeply meaningful, their voices clear and unwavering as they exchanged the vows that would bind them together. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, and Adam lifted Abigail's veil to claim his first kiss as her husband, the congregation erupted in joyful applause. The celebration that followed at the hotel was a true community affair, with seemingly everyone in Kearney contributing something to the feast: Mrs. Miller's famous fried chicken, the blacksmith's wife's pickles, the baker's wedding cake adorned with sugar roses. There was music from a hastily assembled band, dancing that grew increasingly exuberant as the afternoon progressed, and toasts that celebrated not just the couple's love but the spirit of the community that had brought them together. As evening approached, Adam leaned close to Abigail's ear. "Ready to see our home, Mrs. Armstrong?" he asked, the new name sending a thrill through her. With fond farewells and good-natured teasing from their friends, the newlyweds departed in the wagon Adam had prepared, Abigail's belongings secured in the back, flowers and ribbons decorating the sides in festive acknowledgement of the occasion. The journey to their homestead took less than an hour, the familiar landscape transformed in Abigail's eyes by the knowledge that she was traveling not as a visitor but as a resident, a wife, a homemaker. As they approached the property, Adam slowed the wagon, allowing her to fully appreciate the scene. The house stood solid and welcoming in the golden light of late afternoon, a two-story clapboard structure painted white with green trim, smoke curling invitingly from the chimney. A covered porch wrapped around the front and one side, furnished with a swing that Adam had mentioned wanting to build for her. Nearby stood a small barn, a chicken coop, and the beginnings of what would become their vegetable garden. "Welcome home, Abigail," Adam said softly as he helped her down from the wagon. Before she could respond, he swept her into his arms, carrying her across the threshold in the time-honored tradition. Inside, Abigail gasped with delight at what awaited her. The main room was larger than it had appeared from the outside, with polished wooden floors, whitewashed walls, and windows that caught the western light. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, already lit against the evening coolness. The furnishings were simple, but well-crafted: a sofa and two chairs arranged conversationally, a dining table with chairs for six, shelves holding the books Abigail had brought from Ohio. "The kitchen's through here," Adam said, setting her down gently and leading her to an adjacent room equipped with a cast-iron stove, ample cupboards, and a pump that would bring water directly into the house, a luxury Abigail hadn't expected. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms awaited future use, and a master bedroom that took Abigail's breath away. Adam had furnished it with a massive bed frame of hand-carved oak, topped with a mattress from the Mercantile in Kearney and linens that Mrs. Baker must have helped select. "You like it?" Adam asked, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "I tried to think of everything you might need, but I'm sure there's more." Abigail silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her emotion into the contact. "It's more than I ever dreamed," she assured him when they parted. "You've created a true home for us." Relief and happiness washed over Adam's features. "I wanted it to be perfect for us." "It is," Abigail confirmed, looking around the room that would witness their most intimate moments. "Absolutely perfect." As night fell across the plains, Adam lit lamps throughout the house, their warm glow creating an atmosphere of cozy intimacy. They shared a simple supper that neighbors had thoughtfully prepared and left for them, then settled on the porch swing to watch stars emerge in the vast Nebraska sky. "I still can't believe it sometimes," Adam mused, his arm around Abigail's shoulders, "that a broken wagon wheel and a chance encounter could lead to this happiness." "Providence," Abigail suggested, nestling against him, "or perhaps just the best kind of luck." "Whatever brought us together," Adam said, turning to look into her eyes. "I thank God for it every day." As the night deepened around their new home, husband and wife retired to the bedroom that symbolized the beginning of their shared life. With tenderness born of deep love and respect, they discovered each other fully for the first time, their union as natural and right as the joining of earth and sky at the horizon. Afterward, lying in each other's arms with the moonlight streaming through curtains Abigail had sewn with her own hands, they spoke softly of dreams and plans, children to fill the empty bedrooms, crops to sustain them, animals to tend, seasons to witness together. "I love you, Abigail Armstrong," Adam whispered as she drifted toward sleep, secure in his embrace. "And I love you," she replied, the words simple but profound in their truth. Always. The years that followed fulfilled the promise of that first night together. The Armstrong homestead flourished under their combined efforts. Adam's strength and practical knowledge, paired with Abigail's determination and organizational skills, creating a prosperity that exceeded their initial hopes. By their first anniversary, Abigail was expecting their first child, a son they named William Edward after both their fathers. 2 years later, a daughter joined the family, Mary Catherine, with her mother's auburn hair and her father's steady gaze. As their family grew, so did their operation. Adam added acreage to their original homestead, diversifying from cattle to include crops that thrived in the Nebraska soil. Abigail established a reputation for her preserves and baked goods, which were sought after at Kearney's growing market days. The house expanded to a larger kitchen, a dedicated library filled with the books Abigail loved, additional bedrooms for the children who blessed their union. What remained constant was the love that had begun in those desperate moments beside a broken wagon wheel, a love that deepened with shared joys and weathered challenges together. By 1885, more than a decade after their first meeting, the Armstrong family was firmly established as one of the pillars of the Kearney community. Their children, now joined by a younger brother named James, attended the school that Adam had helped build. Their home hosted gatherings that neighbors traveled miles to attend, drawn by Abigail's warmth and hospitality as much as by the opportunity for companionship on the still challenging frontier. On a particular evening in late summer, Adam and Abigail sat on the same porch swing where they had spent their first night as husband and wife, watching their children play in the yard as the sun set in spectacular fashion across the western plains. "Remember that day?" Adam asked suddenly, gesturing toward the distant horizon where the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink reminiscent of the desert heat they'd once endured together. "Which day?" Abigail asked, though something in his tone told her exactly which memory he was revisiting. "When I found you beside your wagon, looking like you might either cry or shoot me," Adam replied with a chuckle. "Your wheels shattered in the desert heat, and I shared my water with you." Abigail smiled at the memory that had transformed from desperate crisis to cherished origin story. "And you said we go together now." "I did," Adam confirmed, taking her hand in his. "Little did I know how true those words would prove to be." "You saved my life that day," Abigail said softly. "Not just from thirst and exposure, but from a future without this." She gestured toward their home, their children, the life they'd built together. "We saved each other," Adam corrected gently. "I was just as lost as you were in my own way, just better hydrated." Abigail laughed, leaning against the husband whose love had been the foundation of her happiness for 12 years. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if my wheel hadn't broken? If you hadn't been tracking those strays that day?" "Sometimes," Adam admitted. "But then I look at what we've built together, and I know that some things are simply meant to be. That wheel broke precisely when and where it needed to, so that I could find you." As twilight deepened into darkness, they called their children inside for supper, moving from the porch into the warm light of the home they'd created together. Around their table, expanded over the years to accommodate growing children and frequent guests, the Armstrong family shared the simple rituals of daily life made sacred by love. Later, after the children were settled in their beds, Adam and Abigail returned to their porch to enjoy the cool evening air and the privacy that allowed them to speak of matters close to their hearts. "I received a letter today," Abigail mentioned, her tone casual though the news was significant. "My cousin in Philadelphia has invited William to attend school there next year. She offers to provide room and board, and there's a scholarship available at the academy her husband oversees." Adam was quiet for a moment, absorbing the implications. Their oldest son, now 11, had shown remarkable aptitude for learning a trait inherited from his mother but developed through both parents' encouragement. "It's a remarkable opportunity," he said finally, "though the thought of him so far away." "I know," Abigail agreed, understanding his mixed emotions because they mirrored her own. "But he could have advantages we simply can't provide here, however much we've prospered." "What does William think?" Adam asked, always mindful that their children were individuals with their own paths to discover. "I haven't mentioned it yet," Abigail replied. "I wanted us to discuss it first, as partners." Adam nodded, appreciating as always the way they approached important decisions together. "We should present the option to him, without expectation. It must be his choice." "Agreed," Abigail said, squeezing his hand in gratitude for his wisdom and support. This was how they had built their life together, decision by decision, challenge by challenge, always facing the future as a united front. From that first desperate meeting in the desert heat to this moment of contemplating their child's future, their partnership had remained the bedrock of their existence. "You ever regret it?" Adam asked suddenly, voicing a question that occasionally still surfaced despite years of evident happiness. "Coming west, marrying a cowboy with nothing but dreams to offer." Abigail turned to face him fully, moonlight silvering her features into an ethereal beauty that still took his breath away after all their years together. "Never," she said with absolute conviction. "Not for a single moment. The day my wagon wheel shattered was the luckiest day of my life, because it brought me to you." Adam gathered her into his arms, overwhelmed as always by the depth of his good fortune. "We go together now," he whispered against her hair, repeating the words that had begun their journey. "Always," Abigail affirmed, turning her face up for his kiss. "Always." Inside their home, their children slept peacefully. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead in the endless Nebraska sky, bearing witness to a love that had begun with a broken wheel and a shared canteen, and had grown into a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. For Adam and Abigail Armstrong, what had started as a chance encounter in desperate circumstances had become a life rich with purpose, joy, and abiding love, proof that sometimes the most profound journeys begin with a single step taken together.